Why are human rights eroding, and what can we do about it, or how should we respond?
I think there are potentially a number of reasons we see that erosion of rights. One of them is that we are living in extremely partisan times. So we've moved from, I guess, periods when there was disputation between the political across the political spectrum, but perhaps not as much as we're seeing now in both in Australia but globally. And that political contestation has flowed through to rights. So we've seen those who in the past would have traditionally upheld the civil and political rights with vigour, so particularly the Liberal Party in Australia, for them that's very much part of their tradition, that idea of individual rights against the state. And yet now we don't see them pushing for the protection of rights, and in fact being part of a significant undermining of rights. So I think that contestation has flowed through to a sense of how those rights matter in a democracy, and so people are taking positions based on who they vote for rather than having a real understanding of how those rights are necessary for all of us to operate effectively in a democratic space. So that's one. Two that are related, that when people are told they're under threat or fear that they're under threat, they're much more likely to identify who is another group as causing that threat and want to take away that group's power or their rights. And we certainly see that in relation to the right to asylum and in relation to immigrants. Immigrants are being framed by some in our political discourse as a threat, whether it's a threat to jobs or housing or whatever else, or in some cases with people who seek asylum, that they're going to, they come from backgrounds that are a threat to our democracy. So that threat then is used to garner support for the limitation of rights. And that's a really significant problem in Australia, I think, at the moment, where people accept that some people shouldn't have the same rights, which is extraordinary. And the other threat is where economic interests claim to be threatened by people exercising their human rights in the form of protest, for example, and where the economy or economic interests are given paramountcy over individuals who are, after all, what make up our democracy. Corporations are not citizens of the country or of the world. They have one interest, and that's an economic interest. And they really have, over time, garnered support for pushes that undermine or take away rights, particularly our rights, our very fundamental democratic rights around protest and freedom of expression. What can we do about that? I certainly think in terms of the partisanship, the more we can, each one of us, seek to understand and to reach out across that political divide, to seek bipartisanship, to encourage our political class to look for bipartisanship and to support it. And to push back against media that say, that we don't want parliaments that are representative of the diversity. We want, a strong party with a big majority. Those big majorities really undermine democracy, and bipartisanship can be seen as a way to perhaps push back at that. In terms of the threats, whether they be considered to be threats to individuals or threats to economic interests, I think we need to be having a conversation about, well, what's the long-term effect of giving away or taking away rights of individuals? Does it actually, in the longer term, undermine the very fabric of our society and the things that matter to us as a society? That sense of fairness, the sense that we are, a wealthy, healthy, spacious country with wealth to share, I think we say in our national anthem, that we actually can be generous and we can seek to push back when those threats are articulated, to understand whether or not they're real, and many of them are not real, and really try and help people to understand how human rights sit in this overall picture and why they're so important in the overall picture. There's a real loss of understanding of what human rights are for, and a lack of awareness of rights in Australia. And in part, it's a chicken and egg problem. We don't have a national human rights framework, so people people haven't spent the time to seek to understand how human rights work and what they can do to support our democracy. And because we don't have that understanding, every time there's an inquiry into proceeding with the Human Rights Act, the pushback from politicians is, well, people don't understand rights, so we need to get people to understand rights before we enact them. And so that makes no sense to me, because people don't have the wherewithal to understand rights in the vacuum of rights that we have in this country. And I think the other thing is we've lost a sense of the moral dimension of human rights, that these are the norms that we seek to live our lives by, the ways we seek to treat each other in that, as the Universal Declaration talks about, I'll use this language carefully, in that brotherhood of man, that family, that human family that we are all part of, and that we all need to support each other to achieve the best we can achieve. We lose that when these threats and the partisanship talk about human rights and marginalise them and allow them to be undermined.